The sword came free with a sound like a bell struck underwater. Aerin Vashara had not meant to touch it. She had not meant to be anywhere near the stone pedestal on the ceremonial terrace. She had not meant to be at the festival of proving at all. She was a horse trainer from the lowland territories, and the only reason she was inside the walls of Stormbreak Fortress was because she'd been hired to deliver 6 stallions to the Alpha King's cavalry master. And the delivery had taken 3 days longer than planned because one of the stallions had thrown a shoe on the coastal pass, and another had refused to cross the bridge at Widow's Bend. But the sword was in her hand. The blade gleamed pale as moonlight in the afternoon sun, and the crowd that had been pressing around the ceremonial terrace went silent with a completeness that felt physical, like a held breath, like the sea pulling back before a wave. And from the dais above, a voice she did not yet know the weight of said, quiet and absolute, "Only my true mate can free it." 3 hours earlier, the coastal road into Stormbreak wound along the edge of a cliff that dropped straight into churning gray water. Aerin rode at the front of the string, her mare picking her way along the rutted path with the careful patience of a horse that had done this work 100 times before. Behind her, 6 stallions walked nose to tail on lead ropes, their hooves striking a steady rhythm against packed earth. The fortress appeared around the final bend, like something carved from the cliff itself. Pale stone walls rose from the rock face, and the towers caught the wind off the sea with a low, constant moan that Aerin felt in her sternum. Banners snapped from every parapet, burnt bronze and deep charcoal. The Eckhart crest, a wolf mid-howl against a crescent moon. The gates were open. People streamed through them in festival clothes, bright colors against gray stone, carrying baskets and leading children and talking in the excited, overlapping chatter of people who had traveled far to see something extraordinary. Aerin knew the basics of the Festival of Proving: ancient tradition, legendary sword in a stone pedestal. Only the Alpha King's fated mate could draw it. Women came from across the territories to try. The sword stayed in the stone until the right one arrived. Aerin was not here to try. She was here to deliver horses and collect her payment and ride home before the coastal storms hit. She guided the string through the outer gates and toward the stables built into the eastern wall, where the cliff sheltered them from the worst of the wind. The cavalry master, a compact woman with cropped gray hair and no patience for pleasantries, spent 40 minutes inspecting each stallion. She signed the delivery papers, handed Aerin a sealed payment envelope, and jerked her chin toward the inner courtyard. "Festival's got the kitchens overflowing. Get yourself a meal before you ride back." Aerin watered her mare, settled the stallions in their stalls, and followed the stream of festival-goers through the inner gates toward the heart of the fortress. The ceremonial terrace occupied the center of the fortress, a broad stone platform overlooking the sea on 3 sides. In its center stood the pedestal, ancient granite, rough-hewn, driven into bedrock. The sword rose from it at a slight angle, its hilt wrapped in dark leather, its blade buried to the midpoint in solid stone. It looked ordinary, practical, the kind of sword a person actually used. A line of women stretched from the pedestal across the terrace and down the stairs. Dozens, dressed in silk and velvet, hair pinned and braided with flowers and jewels. Aerin watched from the edge of the crowd eating a meat pie and felt a distant, uninvolved curiosity. The Alpha King was on the dais. She noticed him the way you notice a storm front on the horizon. He stood at the edge of the raised platform with his arms at his sides and his gaze on the terrace below, and even from 30 paces Aerin could see the tension in him. The controlled stillness of a man holding himself carefully in place. He was tall, broad through the shoulders but lean. His hair was the color of burnt umber, long enough to brush his collar, pushed back from his forehead with his hand rather than a mirror. He wore a fitted dark coat with sleeves pushed to the forearms. No crown, no ceremonial regalia. Just a man watching woman after woman step up to a sword that would not move for them. She finished her meat pie, decided to find the payment office, cash her envelope, and locate a bed for the night. That was the plan. The plan lasted approximately 4 minutes. She was cutting across the edge of the terrace when a child darted across her path, collided with a woman holding a ceramic jug. The jug shattered, the woman stumbled into Aerin, and Aerin stumbled into the stone pedestal. Her hand shot out to catch herself. Her palm closed around the sword's hilt. And the world went warm. Not warm like sunlight or a fire or a bath. Warm like something inside her had been frozen for a very long time and was now, all at once, thawing. The warmth started in her palm and poured up her arm and into her chest and settled behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. And the sword slid from the stone as if the stone had never been holding it at all. That underwater bell sound, clear and resonant and impossible. Silence. Aerin stood with the sword in her hand and her heart in her throat, and the warmth still spreading through her like sunlight filling a room, and every pair of eyes on the ceremonial terrace turned toward her. She was wearing trail-worn riding clothes. Her hair was in a wind-swept half ponytail with pieces falling around her face. From the dais, the Alpha King stared at her. Those amber eyes, warm as honey, wide with recognition. "Only my true mate can free it," he said. And his voice breaks, did something on the word mate. Cracked. Just barely. Like a fissure in a wall that had been holding back an ocean. Aerin looked at the sword in her hand, looked at the king, looked at the sword again. "I was just trying not to fall," she said. A ripple went through the crowd. Not laughter. Something more uncertain, more electric. The king descended the dais. His steps were unhurried, but his eyes never left hers. And with every step, the warmth in her chest intensified, spreading down her arms, pooling in her fingertips, until she could feel it pulsing like a living thing. He stopped 3 paces from her, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, close enough that the warmth became heat. "Thane Eckhart," he said. Not a title, not a declaration, just his name, offered like something fragile. Aerin Vashara. She gripped the sword hilt tighter because her instincts were telling her to step toward him, and her mind was telling her that was insane. "I train horses. I'm not supposed to be here." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile. And yet. She looked down at the blade. The metal was warm in her hand. Warmer than steel should be. "Can I put this back?" "No." A flicker of something. Amusement, but underneath it, vulnerability. "It chose you. It doesn't go back." The crowd pressed closer. Voices began to rise. Aerin caught fragments. "Who is she?" "A horse trainer." "That can't be right." "A commoner." She felt the weight of 100 stares like hands pressing against her skin. "I need to think," she said. He nodded. "Once. Precise. I'll have rooms prepared for you." "I have a room, in the stable quarters." "You're the king's mate. You can't sleep in the stable quarters." "I'm a horse trainer who accidentally grabbed a sword. I can sleep wherever I want." That almost smile again. Warmer this time. Fair enough. But he had rooms prepared anyway. Sea-facing side of the fortress. Wind rattled the windows. The bed was enormous. Aerin sat on the edge and stared at the sword propped against the wall and tried to make sense of the warmth still humming beneath her skin. It faded when she was alone. Not completely. Just enough to notice the absence. A knock at the door. She opened it, expecting the cavalry master. Thane Eckhart stood in the corridor. He'd changed coats. Those amber eyes found hers, and the warmth flooded back, and she saw something shift in his expression that told her he felt it too. "You feel it," she said. Not a question. Since the moment you touched the sword." He paused. "Before that, if I'm being honest, when you were crossing the terrace, I felt something. A pull. I thought I was imagining it." Aerin leaned against the doorframe. The warmth was so strong now that her skin felt flushed. And this happens to every generation's mate? The warmth? I don't know. His honesty was disarming. My father said that when he met my mother, the world went quiet. For my grandfather, it was a sound. Like distant music. Each bond manifests differently. He held her gaze. For us, it seems to be temperature. For us, as if they were already a unit, already a pair. I didn't come here for this, she said. I came to deliver horses. I know. No pressure, no demand, just steady amber eyes and a warmth that pulsed between them like a shared heartbeat. I don't know anything about being a queen. I don't need a queen. The territories have councils and advisors and a perfectly functional governance structure. The corner of his mouth curved. What I need, apparently, is a horse trainer who grabs legendary swords to keep from falling over. She almost laughed. Almost. The warmth was making it hard to think. I need time. You have it. He stepped back. The warmth dimmed. She felt its absence like a draft. The festival runs for 5 more days. Stay. Let me show you the fortress. Let me show you who I am before you decide what any of this means. She should have said no, should have taken her payment, collected her mare, and ridden back to the lowlands. 5 days, she said. He nodded. And something in those amber eyes, something careful and guarded and desperately hopeful, made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with the bond and everything to do with the man standing in front of her, asking for a chance. He left, and the warmth receded to a low hum, and Aerin pressed her hand flat against her sternum and felt it pulsing there like an ember that refused to go out. The first day, he showed her his private stables. 12 horses. A dappled gray mare with a temperament so steady Aerin's fingers itched to work with her. A young chestnut colt that danced at the end of his lead rope. This one, Aerin said, running her hand along the colt's neck. He's got talent, but he's bored. He needs trails. Water crossings. Something to challenge him. Thane leaned against the stall door. My last trainer said he was unmanageable. Your last trainer didn't understand him. The colt pushed his nose into her palm. He's not unmanageable. He's understimulated. They walked the cliff path afterward. The sea crashed below, sending spray onto their faces. The warmth between them intensified with proximity. A steady heat in the narrow space between their shoulders. Why the sword? She asked. Why not just let the bond happen naturally? Why build a whole festival around it? He was quiet for a moment. The wind pulled at his hair. Because 7 generations ago, an Eckhart Alpha ignored the bond. Married for political advantage. The true mate was a seamstress 3 days' ride from the fortress. She lived her whole life with a warmth she couldn't explain and a sense that something was missing. He looked out at the sea. The sword was forged after that, so the bond couldn't be missed or ignored. The weight of that settled over her. That's why you stood there watching, she said quietly. You weren't enjoying it. No. His voice was low. I was terrified. I've been standing on that dais since dawn thinking, what if it doesn't happen? What if the bond isn't here? The vulnerability cracked something open in her chest. She looked at him, this king with his pushed-back hair and his fortress on the sea, and his fear that he might be the one the universe forgot. And the warmth surged so strongly her fingers tingled. It didn't skip you, she said. His eyes found hers. Amber. Warm. Burning. No, it didn't. The second day, the trouble started. Lord Gideon Ravencroft arrived at the fortress with an entourage of 12 and a grievance he made no effort to conceal. His daughter, Lady Corinne, had been the favorite to draw the sword. Gideon had spent 2 years cultivating that expectation, funding festival preparations, positioning his family at every territorial event. Instead, A horse trainer in riding clothes had stumbled into the pedestal and changed everything. Aerin first encountered Gideon in the Great Hall during the evening meal. He was tall, angular, with pale blue eyes that swept over her with an assessment that made her skin prickle. "So this is the horse trainer," he said, approaching with his voice pitched to carry. "How extraordinary. I've heard of swords choosing warriors, choosing queens, choosing women of noble lineage." He sipped his wine. "I've never heard of one choosing a stable hand." "A horse trainer," she corrected. "And the sword didn't ask for my credentials." "Perhaps it should have." He turned to address the surrounding tables. "The integrity of the proving must be maintained. If the selection can be compromised by anyone who stumbles into the pedestal, then what does the sword actually mean?" Murmurs. Uncertain. The kind of murmurs that could tip either direction. Thane was beside her before she registered him moving, not touching her, just there. Close enough that the warmth flared and steadied, close enough that his presence said something to the room without a single word. "The sword has spoken, Lord Ravencroft." His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. Aerin could see the muscle working beneath the skin. "It has spoken clearly and publicly, as it has every generation. With the greatest respect, Your Majesty, I believe a formal inquiry is warranted, for the sake of tradition, for the sake of confidence in the process." Gideon's smile widened. Surely the true mate of the Alpha King would welcome the chance to prove herself beyond doubt. The silence that followed pressed against Aerin's eardrums. "Fine," she said. Both men looked at her. "If you want a formal inquiry, Lord Ravencroft, I'll participate. I've got nothing to hide and nothing to prove to you, but if it puts this to rest, I'll do it." Thane's hand brushed her elbow. Barely a touch. But the warmth bloomed from the contact outward, racing up her arm and into her chest, and she saw his eyes widen slightly as it hit him too. "Aerin," he said, low. Just her name. Weighted with concern. "It's fine." She held his gaze. "Let him have his inquiry." On the third morning, Gideon filed the formal challenge. Aerin stood in the council chamber surrounded by territorial lords and listened to him lay out his case. Questionable circumstances. No witnesses to the initial contact. A commoner with no bond lineage. The possibility of enchantment or manipulation. Aerin let him finish. Then she stood. "Lord Ravencroft is right about one thing," she said. The chamber quieted. "I am a commoner. I have no noble lineage. I have no political connections, no alliances, no territorial holdings. I came to this fortress to deliver 6 stallions and collect payment." She looked at Gideon directly. His pale blue eyes watched her with the calculating stillness of a man who had already decided she was an obstacle, not a person. "But the sword is not a political instrument. It's not a trade agreement or a territorial pact. It was forged to find a bond. And a bond doesn't care about bloodlines." She stepped out from behind the table. "You want proof? Fine. Test the bond itself. Not the sword. The bond. Because if what's between us is real, no inquiry in the world will change it. And if it's not..." She paused, and the warmth in her chest pulsed once, hard, like a heartbeat. "Then I'll leave Stormbreak today and you'll never see me again." The chamber erupted, voices overlapping. Arguments, counter-arguments. Gideon's jaw worked. Thane stood from his seat at the head of the table with the slow, deliberate motion of a man exercising extreme control. "The bond test is conducted by the Fortress Elder," he said. "It requires both parties' consent. Aerin." His amber eyes found hers across the chamber. "Are you certain?" She thought about the warmth. The way it surged when he was near and dimmed when he wasn't. The way it had started before she ever touched the sword. That faint pull on the terrace. That tilt in the air when he descended the dais. "I'm certain." The Fortress Elder was ancient. Small. Sharp-eyed. She conducted the test on the ceremonial terrace at sunset with the full court assembled and the sea crashing below. The test was simple. They stood on opposite sides of the terrace, 30 paces apart. Eyes closed. "Describe what you feel," the elder said. "Cold," Aerin said immediately. "Like something's missing. A hollow where warmth should be." "Walk toward each other. Stop when I tell you." Aerin walked, eyes closed. The warmth grew with every step, filling the hollow, rising from ember to heat, to something like standing in sunlight after a long winter. She stopped when told, opened her eyes. Thane was right in front of her. His eyes were open and the amber burned, and the warmth between them was so strong the air seemed to shimmer. "The bond is genuine," the elder said, and her dry grass voice carried across the silent terrace like a verdict. "It is unbroken, unmanipulated, and unmistakable. I have tested bonds for 40 years. This one is among the strongest I have encountered." Gideon's face went white, then red. Then the particular shade of a man recalculating rapidly and arriving at answers he didn't like. "This doesn't," he started. "Lord Ravencroft." Thane's voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that carried. "You asked for proof. The elder has given it. The bond is real. The sword's choice is confirmed. Any further challenge will be treated as an insult to the elder, the bond, and the crown." His eyes held Gideon's, steady, unblinking. "Are you going to insult the crown, Lord Ravencroft?" A long, trembling silence. Gideon's jaw clenched. He found no ally among the crowd. "No, Your Majesty," he said. "I withdraw my challenge." He turned and walked off the terrace without looking back. Thane exhaled. A small sound, barely audible over the wind. But Aerin was close enough to see the relief move across his features, like light breaking through cloud. "Thank you," he said, quietly, just to her. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She looked up at him. The warmth was everywhere now, in her chest, her hands, the soles of her feet, the backs of her eyes. He wasn't going to stop, not unless the proof was undeniable. Not unless I stood there and let the bond speak for itself. "You were extraordinary." I was terrified. His hand rose, paused. His fingers hovered near her jaw, not touching, and even the almost contact sent warmth flooding through her skin. "May I?" She nodded. His fingertips touched her jaw, gentle, deliberate. The warmth at the point of contact was liquid, spreading outward like ink in water, and Aerin's breath caught. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. "I keep thinking this is going to fade, that the warmth is going to turn out to be temporary. Some kind of proximity effect that'll wear off when I ride back to the lowlands and I'll realize it was just the sword, and the festival, and the sea air making everything feel more significant than it actually is." His thumb traced her cheekbone. Slow. Warm. And? And it's not fading. It's getting stronger. And that terrifies me more than Lord Ravencroft and his formal inquiries and his pale blue eyes ever could. Because I didn't come here looking for this and I don't know what to do with it, and I keep thinking about what you said, about the alpha who ignored the bond, and the seamstress who spent her whole life feeling like something was missing, and I can't. Voice breaks. I can't be that. I can't walk away knowing what this is, and spend the rest of my life in a cold room wondering what it would have felt like to stay. He kissed her, mid-sentence, before she could finish. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, and he kissed her with the careful, devastating tenderness of a man who had spent 3 days restraining himself and had just heard the one thing that made restraint impossible. The warmth detonated. That was the only word for it. It went from steady heat to something incandescent, pouring through every nerve, every cell, lighting her up from the inside like a lantern, and she felt his intake of breath against her mouth and knew he felt it too. The bond between them sang, not a sound, a frequency, a vibration that lived in the marrow of her bones and said, home, home, home. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. His breathing was uneven. His hand on the back of her neck trembled. Stay, he said. Whispers. Not because of the sword, not because of the bond, not because of tradition or expectation or anything anyone else wants this to mean. Stay, because you want to. She pressed her palms flat against his chest, felt his heartbeat under her hands, fast and strong and warm. I want to, she said. The terrace was empty. The court had gone. The sun was setting over the sea, painting the sky in streaks of amber and copper and rose, and the wind carried salt and the distant sound of waves against the cliff. And Aerin stood with her forehead against the Alpha King's and felt warm. Completely, entirely, down to the bone, warm. For the first time in her life, the cold couldn't reach her. 2 months later, the stables had expanded. Aerin had overseen the addition herself, working with the fortress builders to design a training ring on the sheltered side of the northern wall, where the cliff created a natural windbreak. The chestnut colt, whose name turned out to be Ember, had become her personal project. He'd learned water crossings, trail obstacles, and the kind of lateral work that made the cavalry master raise her eyebrows and say grudgingly that perhaps she'd been wrong about him being unmanageable. Gideon Ravencroft had been stripped of his territorial advisory position after an investigation revealed his campaign included bribing festival officials and attempting to tamper with the pedestal's enchantment. The tampering hadn't worked. The sword was ancient and the magic was older than any lord's ambition. But the attempt was enough. Gideon was confined to his estate, his privileges suspended. The sword hung in the great hall now, mounted on the wall above the hearth, its blade catching the firelight. Aerin walked past it every day and still felt a faint pulse of warmth from it, like a greeting, like recognition. It was late evening. The fortress was quiet. Aerin stood on the cliff path with her face turned into the wind and the sea below, and the stars appearing one by one overhead. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. Always did. The warmth announced him before anything else, blooming in her chest like sunrise, spreading through her arms and into her fingertips until she was lit up with it. Thane stopped beside her, close, his shoulder against hers. He was wearing that simple dark coat again, the one without any marks of rank, the one he wore when he wanted to be a man rather than a king. His hair was getting longer. She'd noticed. She hadn't mentioned it because she liked the way it curled slightly at his collar, and she suspected he knew. Ember cleared the water crossing today, she said, full canter. Didn't hesitate. Of course he didn't. His arm came around her waist. Easy. Familiar. The warmth intensified where their bodies pressed together, steady and certain and constant. He has the best trainer in the territories. Flatterer. Realist. He pressed his mouth to her temple. Warm. Everything was warm. The elder stopped me in the corridor today. What did she want? To tell me that she tested a bond once before that was this strong. Her own grandparents. They were together for 62 years. His voice dropped. Pauses. She said the warmth never faded for them. Not once. Not even at the end. Aerin turned to face him. His amber eyes caught the starlight. There was no guardedness in them anymore. No wall. No fear. Just a man looking at a woman with the kind of devotion that lives in the bones and stays. I was thinking, she said, about the alpha who ignored the bond, the seamstress. I remember. I'm glad I fell. She smiled. I'm glad the child ran into that woman and I stumbled into the pedestal. because the alternative was riding home and spending the rest of my life wondering why I was always warm for no reason. His hands framed her face, gentle. The warmth between his palms and her skin was luminous. Aerin Vashara, he said, and the way he said her name was like a vow. I spent every festival since I was old enough to understand the sword terrified that it would never choose, that I would stand on that dais and watch every woman try and fail. He kissed her forehead, her nose, the corner of her mouth. And then you fell into my life in riding clothes, and the sword came free like it had been waiting for you all along. She kissed him, slow, deliberate. The warmth between them sang that frequency again, bone deep and resonant, and the wind off the sea wrapped around them, and the stars burned overhead, and the fortress stood solid beneath their feet. And Aerin thought, this is what it means to be warm. This is what it means to come home. Below them, the waves struck the cliff in their ancient, patient rhythm. Above them, the wolf banner snapped in the wind. And the sword in the great hall pulsed once, soft and warm, like a heart remembering the moment it started beating.